Police Minister Senzo Mchunu, who is on special leave, says President Cyril Ramaphosa was briefed on the disbandment of the Political Killings Task Team and agreed to it. Mchunu was testifying for a second day at the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee probing allegations of political interference in the police force.
Did the President agree to the disbandment of PKTT?
The answer in the affidavit is that I briefed the President, he agreed with the briefing I gave him.
So, Honorable Minister, is the answer yes?
Yes, as is in the affidavit.
The answer is yes. The answer which we must record is yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mchunu has reiterated that he acted within his constitutional mandate to disband the PKTT, adding that he didn't interfere in any police operations.
No, I've stated my constitutional role here very clearly and stated that I acted within the Constitution. I acted within the legal framework. And there's no interference. And I do remember that General Mchunu did when he submitted, I don't know whether in the commission or here, that there are instances in the Mhlali where I went to the police station. Those matters are not political interference. And if I get the opportunity here or in the commission, I'll go back to those matters comprehensively. But I did not interfere in any police operations. I don't take them like the decisions that we're talking about as having been taken for sweet. They were well considered and they were in the interests of the country, and that's what I need to demonstrate. I wasn't expecting any sweet sale anyway. Because you are not in government for sweet things. But I am convinced that the decisions I took were in the interest of the country and had nothing to do with the allegations of cartels and so on. As you see, some of these things started in 2019. And personal, I don't graze anywhere close to criminal cartels, and it's the first time that somebody tells me I graze together with cartels.
Well, at the same time, Mchunu says he believes he wasn't given enough time to explain himself to the committee. He says the proceedings could have been more thorough.
That was just been fine, but I think that we could have covered more than we did actually cover. But I'm subject to proceedings, those who are presiding over proceedings and evidence leader. And indeed, it is true that at some point I felt that I have lesser space to explain things on questions that have been asked. To be allowed to move on until I'm done. But I believe that, well, evidence leader is also doing his job. So I don't have any, I would say, bad feeling, but I think we can improve the situation, remembering that I'm the accused and I need to be given a fair opportunity to explain.
Well, let's unpack this testimony further with former Western Cape Head of Detectives, Jeremy Vearey. Jeremy, thank you so much for your time. Let's start here. We heard the Police Minister, Senzo Mchunu, saying he disbanded the Political Killings Task Team to save money and protect the police's reputation. But those reasons don't line up with what we've heard from other police generals in this matter. From where you sit this week, what he's told the Parliament, members of Parliament, does those explanations hold any water?
Yes, there are two important game-changing reasons that were given that we were not exposed to before. The first one is where the minister in his testimony suggests that because the murder and robbery and serious violent, the murder and robbery unit and the serious violent crimes component existed at the time of his decision, to have another body existing at the same time on which state expenditure of public money is spent on, while that is supposed to be done by another structure. He went so far as to refer to it as unauthorized or fruitless or wasteful expenditure. If that argument, and I expected that the Commission would go further and tease out that, because the violation of the Public Finance Management Act is a serious offense with public money. If it is found indeed so, that while serious violent crimes and the murder and robbery unit, to which people had to be moved, which would not have been a major expense, existed at the time and they continued to sign off on millions afterwards, if that is proven, the National Commissioner, firstly, has acted unlawfully. General Mkhwanazi would be acting unlawfully to be part of that continued process. So would General Khumalo, and so would General Sibia, because once irregular expenditure, in terms of our Treasury regulations at paragraph 9.1, is identified or detected, there's an obligation on the official in 9.1.2 to report those matters to the accounting officer, which in this case would be the National Commissioner. But if the National Commissioner is a problem, if you consider that, then one would expect that the minister, upon detection of such unauthorized retake, would have reported it further. But it would be a very legitimate ground to prevent further violation of the Public Finance Management Act, to almost terminate whatever is the source of that expenditure immediately. Otherwise, you can become complicit in it. So that's the one reason. The second very compelling argument, and that was quite significant, I think that needs to be tested, is the reason why the mandate of that task team only restricted itself to political killings, primarily in KwaZulu-Natal, while such incidents were prevalent throughout the country. What motivated that exclusive preserve of it by that particular region, if the mandate technically covers all political killings? So, and the second thing is, if you have a task team when that expenditure, I was just looking at the figures given to the AGU, the anti-gang unit in the Western Cape, which is minuscule compared to what the type of money spent on this task team. And the killings that they have to attend to by far rate more even in a month than the time of that old task team's cases that it exists. So to me, that is a serious concern, that a new factor like that, if it informed the minister's reasoning, it is fair to say that it is a valid consideration.
And I want to look,
immediately correct that to ensure that such resources are in line with the PFMA and spent in the interest of the broader public. Well, in general, I can then understand the reasoning of that and the immediacy attached to it. So that's the first thing.
And Jeremy,
yes,
you bring up very two good points there to say that what was compelling from the suspended police minister's testimony was the fact that One, he did indeed flag that at around in 2022 that the unit itself, there was some funding that had become irregular. I want to claw that back a little bit and talk to us about the fact that he also did flag at some point that SAPS, this particular unit, was never really a formal SAPS unit. Just talk to us about the dangers of that, especially given the fact that you've flagged this under the Public Finance Management Act.
Okay, the danger of that is simply this. Okay, the unit was formed at the time when there wasn't a murder and robbery unit. But at the time it was justified because they needed to focus on a certain tendency of political murders, although it was fairly restricted for whatever reason must be explained politically, only to KZN. But it was formed because of a need to rapidly address the situation investigatively. Well, be that as it may, but come 2022, the very reason now became to some degree redundant and became unexplainable in terms of the PFMA when murder and robbery was formed. And those people could continue their job in murder and robbery. Now, the advantage of doing it in murder and robbery is murder and robbery was also a provincial structure in the detectives and a national structure. So the question would be, if the provincial commissioner was concerned about the loss of some degree of control over the work around political killings in KZN, that would be irrelevant, that consideration, because the structure would be under his command in the first place, answerable to his provincial head of crime detection. So to me, it also then raises questions of what we heard before, if that argument is found to be valid, and how we're going to have to re-examine what we were told by General Mkhwanazi, by General Sibia and General Masemula in relation to this very important issue of irregular expenditure and unauthorized expenditure while another unit exists. Another unit existed to do the same work. So it has implications right backwards to the other testimony. That version now has to be tested. And it would be disturbing if none of this ever entered into the minds of the managers in the police, irrespective of what the minister said. We have a fiduciary duty to ensure this doesn't happen in our structure, especially if we're at the senior management level and top management, because and the National Commissioner, especially if he's the accounting officer, if this is not detected and it goes on for months, and the minister said, this is wrong, and on the basis of the PFMA, let alone us having to detect it on its own, then there's also the matter of insubordination. There's the matter of intentional defiance. And now it doesn't matter anymore whether there was a phased out an agreement process, because the people could simply have transferred with their dockets to murder and robbery. And the PFMA, the Treasury would have been satisfied, or SCOPA might later, when we need to be explaining this expenditure, be satisfied that the only expense is the expense of the transferring back to murder and robbery, where they could have continued the work. So the implications in terms for management of the police, everyone who testified there around this issue is grave. You go to prison for playing with public money in a wasteful and unauthorized way.
Certainly. And I need
now, but I want to know whether the minister has reported that to the Treasury, because the Act requires that there must be consequence management. There must, in 9.1.3, for example, of the Treasury regulations, it refers to the fact that there must be a determination worked on the appropriateness of disciplinary steps against whoever is responsible for the irregular or unauthorized expansion. And then 9.1.4 said there must be recovery of those losses. Now, this is very serious for those who were complicit in if it is true, if it is proven in getting further involved in furthering this irregular or unauthorized expenditure, because they will have to pay it back
And
if
Jeremy,
one follows the law.
I would have to ask, given what you've said, especially given the fact that there was, as you've heard from Mchunu saying that there was a duplication, there was a possibility of, irregular funds to this specific unit and task team. But we've heard from Konazi and Masimula earlier speaking about the fact that the PKTT was working. Does the fact that it was working, the results that were being produced versus, of course, the issues that were raised by Mchunu regarding the funding of this particular unit outweigh the work that was being done, the crime, the ridding of criminals in the streets of South Africa?
You see, the minister, when he makes the argument of only KZN, this mandate being applied to, then the question arises whether it was working for the whole country. Now, we all know it certainly wasn't working for the whole country because all political killings weren't taken. That's clear. The minister has established that, and even in the arguments of the testimony before by General Masimula, General Sibia, and all of them, they emphasized that the work is centrally involved around KZN. Now, if you ask me whether it was working, their output in a very limited way in the province, and not even all the cases in the province, a limited way in the province, to answer this question must be compared with what they were supposed to do nationally in terms of their mandate. And they failed nationally. They might have been successful in the province in terms of the impact on the province, but this happened under the watch of the National Commissioner, General Sibia, and General Khumalo and everybody involved. This happened under their watch, that the union that was supposed to broaden its mandate delimited itself to KZN on that mandate. And that, if what the minister is saying correct, is inexcusable.
Sure, definitely.
And warrants some answers from all the police officers involved.
And definitely
I
for
think
it
that
to be tested.
the rest of the issues dealt with the minister, those are versions of what letter was written by who and what the content of what means. But I can understand now the immediacy with which the minister had to inject the situation in terms of its lawfulness, the issue what he detected in terms of the lawfulness of continued unauthorized, irregular and wasteful expenditure.
Well, certainly. Thank you so much, Jeremy Vearey, for giving us that perspective to look at, specifically coming out from what Mchunu had to say